Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It's the CFL Week 16 edition of the show, Ian Cameron, and we got Will Arndt back in the house this week and ready to talk CFL Week 16. We'll also get into a little bit of NFL at the end of the show, just a couple of hot-button topics and issues to discuss. But, Will, I know you're out there in California on the West Coast right now, hopefully enjoying the vibes there out there on the left coast. But how are things going?
Yep, all's well. I've had a run of a couple of months here where there has not been a dull moment, and it's good. As fun saying I like to reference. Can't complain about a full plate when we ask to eat. So it's been good. I'm out here doing something, maybe working on a video game that people really like and is pretty popular. So that's what brought me out here. But
Wow. How about that for a
doesn't mean
tease?
I
Wouldn't
love
be
it more
bad,
than my
bad in
CFL
NFL, would it?
football. I can't really say, but
His
but
lips are sealed, as the
hey,
Go-Go's used to say. Yeah.
but hey, still it doesn't do anything for me like CFL football does. So let's go.
No, you're right about that. There's no question. So with that in mind, we will dive into the CFL. First of all, it's been a really nice run for me in the CFL the last few weeks, and it's been a good season overall. But it kind of felt like we were just chipping away with small winning weeks. But we've had big winning weeks the last couple. It's been really nice to see that. Last week was a spectacular week on the CFL board. The results were tremendous. Just looking back on what I had Hamilton double result, against Winnipeg, lead at the halftime and win the game. And obviously they were able to get that done. I had the BC Lions team, the gift that just keeps on giving, guys. I tell you, just bet it and forget it. BC Lions team total over every week, and it's been hitting, and it did again last week. BC over 32.5. And, of course, they put a big 38 on the board against Ottawa in a revenge spot after they blew the game against Ottawa the week before. The full game over we had in that Ottawa-BC game as well. We had Edmonton plus the points against Toronto. They should have won that game. The Cody Fajardo fumble basically turned the game in Toronto's favor. And credit to Jarrett Doege, and we'll get into Jarrett Doege in a little bit, Toronto quarterback who took over for an injured Nick Arbuckle late in that game and did enough, engineered a last minute scoring drive to get Toronto into field goal position to win the game, and Liram Hajrullahu did just that. So, but Edmonton plus the points cashes. The over in that game cashed, and it wasn't looking good early, but it got there. And then my best bet on the show, Montreal Alouettes, who needs the plus 8.5 points. They won outright, big, against the red-hot Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Macbeth.
The best game I've ever seen McLeod Bethel Thompson play. And you could say that you want what you want about some of those Toronto games that he had, maybe some of the other games in his career. I know he's won a Grey Cup, but nevertheless, I have not seen him throw the ball better than he did against Saskatchewan. And if you can only get that every week out of him, and that's the problem, you normally can't get that out of him every single game, but you certainly got it last week. Great performance in beating Saskatchewan. And before we get into the Week 16 games, we will start by talking about Saskatchewan, because as we always do, we start with the team that's on the bye week, and that is Saskatchewan. And by the way, there's a disturbing trend in this league that's becoming really, really weird and interesting. The teams going into the bye week, that means teams playing the game going into their bye week, are struggling. And it's almost like the team is kind of losing focus, losing that edge. They're looking forward to the week off, getting away from the football field a little bit. But teams have not performed well, straight up, or ATS for that matter, the game before their bye week. And this is something to monitor. It's something that's become kind of a pattern here. And it's Saskatchewan, a bad performance, laying an egg going into their bye week last week against Montreal, and coming off the two big wins back-to-back against Winnipeg. I think that they were kind of ripe, for a bad game. And boy, oh boy, did they have it. I mean, the defense got carved up by Montreal, whether it was Stevie Scott filling in for Sean Thomas Erlington on the ground, McLeod Bethel Thompson through the air, did whatever he wanted. It was pretty stunning to see that, because of all the good players that Saskatchewan has in that secondary. The pass rush wasn't great, and that's something Saskatchewan's been known to get pressure. But Bethel Thompson had time, made the Riders pay for it, and it was just an all-around dud. and Corey Mace and Trevor Harris after the game talked, it was just a bad game. Although Trevor mentioned in his post-game press conference, and it's kind of true, Saskatchewan's gotten away with this in the wins they had before the loss to Montreal, Will, is the fact that they've started slow on offense multiple games now, taking them into the second quarter, into the second half for them to really hit their stride on offense and get going and sustain drives and move the chains and, get points on the board. And he's was talking about, we got to fix that. We can't be sluggish the way we have been specifically on offense in the first quarter, noting the slow starts of the Saskatchewan offense in recent weeks. But Saskatchewan's going to be fine. They're still in a great spot, first place in the West Division, 10-3, 2 games ahead, one game ahead of Calgary in the loss column, 10-3 Saskatchewan, Calgary 8-4. But it is important for Saskatchewan to maintain distance from Calgary because Calgary's got the head-to-head tiebreaker on Saskatchewan by going 2-0 against Saskatchewan this season. But they're still in a good spot, first in the West, going into that bye week, even after the bad game against Montreal. And like I said, it's a bad game. It's not a sign of a decline or things you got to panic about. It's just, you're not going to have your best every single week. It doesn't matter what the sport or what the league. And Saskatchewan, I'm sure, will be looking to rebound coming out of their bye week. But Will, any thoughts on the Saskatchewan Roughriders?
Yeah, I mean, sitting at 10-3, obviously frustrating loss to have, but when you zoom out, already have clinched a playoff spot. Not in the manner in which anybody really wants to do so, but still, again, when you get off on the bye week and you remove yourself from the emotion of things and get to reflect and gather your thoughts and recover and all that stuff, pretty damn good spot to be sitting in. I think we've talked about this for weeks, that they're built to go the long haul in terms of having a running game and having protected the quarterback well, and they've gotten after teams on defense, and the leadership they have from a head coach and quarterback. So I think there's a lot of really good things there for this team. But you brought up an interesting point. It really made me think on things during my time in the CFL and how other guys perceive it. And I really would be curious to do a little more reading on how the bye week dynamic plays specifically in the CFL, because you got half of the roster are guys that are not from the country, and it's a real thing about, like, hey, I finally have a week to go, like, deal with this thing back home, or I'm gonna go get on a flight and go visit. I have my people coming in to come visit me. My girlfriend's gone; she's come. Like, there's just a lot of distracting thoughts that do come along with the bye week. There's this dichotomy of, hey, we know, like, in the locker room in front of a microphone, that we have a bye next week, so, like, let's get this one. There's a sense of urgency to want to get a win going into the bye, but you could also say, like, all right, damn, like, let's just get through this shit, and excuse my French, and once we get the bye week, we'll have a chance to kind of recover and get our thoughts and all that stuff. But then again, like, there's all those other things that kind of come along with it. And I'd be willing to bet there's some discrepancy between bye weeks of guys in the NFL and guys in the CFL, or teams in the CFL, I should say, just because it's different. Half the guys are not from there, and they're not going to live there year round. Whereas, like, if you're on an NFL team, you're probably going to live in that city that you maybe are assigned to. So anyway, just some anecdotal thought for you folks, if you want to do a little deep dive into that. I know I'm going to do a little reading on that myself, because you brought up an interesting point. But as far as Saskatchewan, tough loss, but 10-3, sitting in a good spot. I think built to go the long haul. I don't think anyone's sitting here saying that these guys are pretenders.
No, it was a bad game. I mean, they're fine. They've had a great season. The only team they haven't been able to beat is Calgary, and there's really no shame in that. And it doesn't mean that if they meet each other in the playoffs, they couldn't beat Calgary. But like I said, it was a bad game. It was a perfect storm. They had 2 monster wins against the dreaded rivals, Winnipeg.
Yeah.
You had the bye week on deck. And Montreal, who they already clobbered, Will, by the way, in Montreal. And it just was a ripe spot for them to just, lay a friggin' egg. And that's exactly what we saw. Now, be careful with the going into the bye week trend. We've talked about how teams have struggled going into the bye week. Teams that are losing prior to the game going into their bye week, that's a little bit different. Focus could still be there because you're desperate or you're urgent. You need to bounce back when you lose. But I think it was such a great spot to go against Saskatchewan because of the fact that last week, or they had the 2 big wins against Winnipeg, and it was just a good spot where you maybe weren't going to get their absolute best And obviously, we ended up seeing that for sure. All right, let's get into week 16. We've fallen into this pattern now in the league with the schedule where it's going to be pretty much 2 Friday night games, 2 Saturday games. The rest of the regular season, you're going to get a Friday doubleheader, a Saturday doubleheader, because as you know, there's no more Thursday night CFL. They don't want to compete with
Yeah.
NFL, and there's no Sunday CFL because again, they don't want to compete with the NFL. There's only going to be only the Grey Cup is going to be on Sunday in November. Other than that, there's no Sunday games anymore in the CFL during NFL season, and of course, no Thursday night games. So it's Friday and Saturday in the regular season from here on out. So the first of the Friday night doubleheader, Friday night football tonight. Got to get that in. Montreal and Toronto. Montreal 6.5-point road favorites, 50.5 the total in this game. Big line move in this game. This opened 2.5 Montreal as road favorites, all the way up to 6.5, and it's the quarterback news. It's Nick Arbuckle out for the Toronto Argos 2 to 4 weeks. Chad Kelly is not even in sight yet as far as returning. So it's Jarrett Doege who's going to get the start for the Toronto Argonauts. Now, he came into the game last week against Edmonton and led them on that game-winning field goal drive. Give him credit, but totally different scenario when Montreal and the great defensive coordinator, Noel Thorpe, know you're the starter, you're the guy and can game plan and scheme against you. It's a completely different animal. Let's see how Jarrett Doege handles it. His overall numbers in his career, I think he's got the same amount of touchdowns as interceptions. That's never something you want to see by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, one thing that's been pretty damn constant in this league. Now, Jarrett Doege does have a handful of starts under his belt. He did get into games when he was with Edmonton, with the Elks, and that's why that game meant something to him. That's why he was, so emotional after leading that game-winning drive, because he was cut by the Edmonton Elks in their training camp. And certainly didn't mind sticking it to them there at the end of the game last week. But this is a totally different situation. Montreal knows he's going to be the guy. They can kind of figure out his tendencies, watch tape, all that, really devise a game plan against him. So when it comes to projecting Jarrett Doege's performance here, I have to see it before I believe it as far as whether he's going to be, playing a great game and, just moving the football up and down the field against a Montreal defense that, I was going to say they got their swagger back, but they did still give up, a 40, then the 48-31 win against Saskatchewan. They did still give up 31 points, and they haven't been nearly as good on defense this year as I think a lot of us thought. In fact, they've given up 31, 26, 26, and 36, in their last 4 games. That's not vintage defense from Montreal, but you have to factor in a couple of things. The couple of these games where they gave up 26 points to Hamilton and Winnipeg, and the BC game really as well. You had Caleb Evans for the BC game. He gets injured. James Morgan takes over. And then you had James Morgan for the end of the BC game, for the Winnipeg game, and for the Hamilton game. And I watched all 3 of those games. They couldn't move the football. He could barely get a first down. The passing was inaccurate. They could barely sustain drives. It seemed like it was 2-and-out punt for Montreal in the Winnipeg loss, the BC, the end of the BC game, and of course the Hamilton loss. That Hamilton loss in particular, 26-9. It was a horrible game for James Morgan. Absolutely, you could tell he was struggling. I tell he was a guy that wasn't ready to start a CFL game just yet. He really had a tough day. And when that happens and your defense is on the field for so long, they're going to get worn down. It's that simple. I think so. Part of the struggles on the defensive side, I think, are because the offense aren't holding their end of the bargain. And they're going 2-and-out all the time. That's a problem. Then, of course, as offense is lighting up Saskatchewan, it makes things easier. A lot of the Saskatchewan points, by the way, were in the fourth quarter, garbage time. So you've got a Montreal defense that, they gave up 36 against BC, but the offense did them no favors. Couldn't move the football. Defense gets tired and worn down. They're on the field too long. Same thing with the Winnipeg loss. Same thing with the Hamilton loss. So I kind of put an asterisk beside those games defensively because it looks like they struggled. They gave up a lot of points, but there was situations that made it more difficult on Montreal's defense. And then last week, a lot of the 31 points Saskatchewan scored were like I said, in garbage time when the game was already out of reach. And by that point, you can't make too much of what you're seeing from the defense. When the game was there to be had and won, Montreal's defense really played well in the first half. Against Trevor Harris and that Riders offense. So I still think this is a pretty good defense, a defense that's also gotten healthier the last few weeks. We've talked about how, they've had, Marc-Antoine Dequoy back, a lot of their secondary players back. And keep in mind, last week, Sean Lemon and Sean Oakman on the D line were two very late scratches in that game due to for Montreal. And so they didn't have those two guys in there. They're both back. They're both going to play this week, Lemon and Oakman. So the D line is definitely going to get some reinforcements for this game, which is good to see. Now we will have to see about Deontay Evans because they just started getting that entire secondary healthy again, and it looks like he now might miss this game as he hasn't practiced yet this week. Of course, Davis Alexander is still a ways away from, at least a week away, I should say, from returning. So it will be McLeod Bethel Thompson once again, coming off just a brilliant performance last week against Saskatchewan. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that might have been his best game. Like I said, I just think he was in total command, start to finish. Never seen him more accurate. His decision-making was impeccable, which isn't always the case with Macbeth, which we've talked about in the past. Sometimes the decision-making gets away from him, and he's forcing it, or he's just wayward with his passing, with the particular throw. We didn't really see that at all. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 20 for 26, 379 through the air, 14.2 yards per pass average in that game. So not only was he very efficient, but he was also not afraid to create those explosive pass plays as well down the field. The vertical game was there for McLeod Bethel Thompson last week. Montreal needed that win desperately. That snapped a 5-game losing streak. They're now 6-7. They're still in second place in the East Division right now. I think when you look at the standings too, at this point in time, they're only 1 game ahead of Toronto. So Toronto's at 5-8. So this ends up being a pretty big game in the East Division, where Montreal's at least got a home game. If they finish second, they go to the East semifinal and they host it. If they fall to third, they got to go on the road for that East semifinal. So it's kind of a battle for second. Montreal's definitely not out of winning the division either. I know my Ticats are 8-5, Hamilton, but Montreal is still only a couple games back. So if they win, they're still very much in the East Division race as well. I got to see it before I believe it when it comes to Jarrett Daigie in the passing game here for the Toronto Argonauts. I think it could be a struggle for him the first start. Montreal, certainly if you got 2.5, I think that's the right side. I think they win this game, build on the momentum they gained last week against Saskatchewan. 6.5, it's getting a little bit rich at the current number. What I would say is if you still like Montreal, this is a bet that I used with Hamilton last week in this moderate favorite range. You can bet Montreal double result, and it'll probably be around -110 even money. So that's Montreal to lead at halftime and Montreal to win the game. That's what that bet is. Montreal double result. It's a bet I used, like I said, with Hamilton last week, where Hamilton against Winnipeg lead at halftime and win the game. That's the double result bet. I think there's a good chance that can happen. Daigie starts slow. Maybe they dig themselves a bit of a deficit, and it's just too much to overcome in the second half against a aggressive Montreal defense. I was impressed, too, with the run game of Stevie Scott last week for Montreal. And considering that Thomas Erlington was out, and now they've got Travis Tice banged up and out as well. That's 2 of their other running backs. There could be a lot on Stevie Scott's plate once again, the former Indiana running back, and he sure looked good running the ball last week for Montreal. So I would still go in that direction. At the current number, I don't know if I'd lay 6.5. I'd still lean that way, but I think the best way to bet Montreal right now is take Montreal double result, which you can get in that -110, -115 range. Will, what do you think here with Alouettes Argos?
A few thoughts. First off, I just want to remind the viewers, man, Ian is on top of it. You got some really, really quality, hard-hitting football analysis from an analytical standpoint, and even as a player. And I know he has some good relationship with other players. Like the guy gets it, and it's really a breath of fresh air.
I just try not to sound dumb. That's all.
Well, mission accomplished. And as far as this game, from a personal standpoint, I'm interested. I go back to my time with Noel Thorpe, the defensive coordinator for Montreal, and he's got a very mad scientist type of feel to him. I remember him calling me into his office at 8 o'clock at night on a Tuesday and just being like, "Hey, what do you know about this player? Hey, if you're a quarterback and you're looking at this, what are you thinking if I give you this look?" And I know I'll have something cooked up, to throw a relatively new quarterback or a different starter. So I'm interested to see what that is from a fandom standpoint. Now, from some hard-hitting football analysis, I will say if you zoom out, Ryan Dinwiddie has very much got a little Kevin O'Connell thing going on where he's obviously very, quarterback whisperer esque. He made Chad Kelly an MLP candidate. He took Nick Arbuckle and, revived his career and, won a Grey Cup with Nick Arbuckle. And Jared Dagey goes in and has some success. So the guy obviously gets it, former CFL quarterback. And, here's where I'm going with this is Toronto, 395 points scored this year. That is tops in the league. They've also let up the most points in the league with 417. So wouldn't be surprised here if, Montreal land down, a touchdown to see Toronto keep the game close enough with the production they could probably get on offense, being at home. Like you said, Diggy's got some starts under his belt, so it's not like he's a total sloppy. And but at the same time, if you're asking me, just who do I like? I like Montreal in this spot, but I think Toronto could absolutely keep it close and score some points given what we've seen from them. And then, yeah, from a CFL standpoint, I'm looking at the standings right now. Gosh, it is a big, big game in terms of implications. And for the most part, things are pretty tight across the league right now. This is where things can really, get interesting, or teams that are at the top can separate.
No doubt. And look, I think in time, like let's say Arbuckle's out a while, Kelly's nowhere in the mix, and it's Jarrett Dagey's team for the next several weeks. Jarrett Dagey in 4 weeks from now will be better than Jarrett Dagey coming up on Friday night. I think with Ryan Dinwiddie, I think that's a fair assessment because that we have to give Ryan Dinwiddie credit for. He's worked very well with quarterbacks. We've seen the improvement that he's made with Arbuckle from week one, where it was a struggle, and then of course to just before he got injured when he was playing a very high level of football, no doubt for this team. So Dagey will get better week by week, but the very first start in the division against a team that obviously is starting to get healthy. And I think it's a team that's better than their record says they are because obviously they've been playing with friggin' James Morgan for weeks. Bethel Thompson struggled his first salvo, filling in for Davis Alexander. They've started to get banged up, tons of injuries. They had Philpott and Mack, their two best receivers, out. And by the way, not only are Philpott and Mack back, and they've been great the last couple of weeks, especially in Saskatchewan last week, but now Cole Speaker, who didn't play last week, is also back this week. So that receiving core is healthy. That's the bet I like. Montreal double result. I don't know if I'd lay 6.5, but I think Montreal double result. Lead at half, win the game is a better option to go with there now. All right, BC Calgary. We've got Calgary's 5.5-point home favorites, 54.5 the total. Calgary off a bye week and a loss. Because if you remember, before the bye week, they lost the back half of that home and home against the Edmonton Elks, and it was surprising, really, because they played so well in Calgary, and then 6 days later in Edmonton, and their defense really struggled. Like Kevin Rankin, the running back for Edmonton, had a boatload of success running the football right down Calgary's throat. I think that's the alarming part. But I know they said this on the broadcast throughout. Jalen Hutchings, who's a great player on that D-line for Calgary, was out. And boy, did they miss him. I didn't know they'd miss him that much. But suddenly there's Edmonton running the football with tons of success. Calgary couldn't really do anything about it. So the defense really struggled in that game against Edmonton before the bye week, 31-19. And to be honest, Vernon Adams, big play VA, not so big play VA in that loss to Edmonton as well. The offense kind of sputtered throughout that game as well. Only 15 for 29. Very inefficient was Vernon Adams, 229 through the air. Dedrick Mills didn't get anything going on the ground. But like I said, 204 rushing yards in that game for Justin Rankin of the Edmonton Elks. So not a good performance. So they've sat on that loss and now the bye week following that game, now entering this game against BC. So it's kind of a spot where you want to kind of beware of betting against this Calgary team. And even with the injury to Hutchings, we'll have to see if he's back. It wouldn't shock me if he is because he certainly had the bye week to get healthy. Yeah, he's back in full. And look, clearly the run defense suffered mightily without him. So they are likely going to get him back. He's been practicing in full this week, which is a good sign. Adrian Green is practicing. He's one of their better defensive backs, and boy, are they going to need him because we know this BC team with Nathan Rourke can flat out throw the football. He can spin it, and he is spinning it like he's playing. That was almost the perfect game, Nathan Rourke against Ottawa. Just bing, 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 bing. He was just unbelievably accurate, spectacular game. Just scored on almost every drive against Ottawa in that big win against the Red Blacks last week. Obviously, much tougher challenge here against Calgary this week. So to have Adrian Green back will help that Calgary secondary. That being said, there are still some key injury concerns on the D line with Folarin Arumalade, Sean Peterson not practicing. They're likely not to play in this game. So just when you get Hutchings back, you do have some other issues or injury concerns, I should say, along that defensive line. This is a weird game because I think if I were to bet the spread, I would take Calgary here, -5.5. It's just difficult to trust BC, defensively, because I would think Vernon Adams is going to step up and play better. And let's not forget, Dustin Crum and the Ottawa Red Blacks still scored 27 points last week. And yeah, the BC defense was good early, but as that game went on, it started to look like the old BC defense again, giving up big plays, and it seems like an automatic. The other team is going to get the ball into BC territory on almost every drive. There are still issues with the pass rush, issues with the secondary for the BC Lions. They've been able to outscore their defensive issues in some games, but like I said, the defense is still a concern, no doubt, when their defensive rating right now in the CFL. The nice thing is the CFL stats. You can overall defensive ranking takes into account opponent points, opponent net yards, rushing, passing net, yards allowed, net yards allowed to the opponent, defensive plays made, quarterback sacks, interceptions, knockdowns. They put all these different statistical categories to second down conversion percentage. They put all these different defensive statistical categories together to create an overall defensive ranking. And BC's overall defensive ranking is 8th out of 9 teams. Only Edmonton is lower. And Edmonton, by the way, a lot of they're last. A lot of it was because the early part of the year was just so bad for their defense. They've actually gotten better. I would say right now BC's the worst defensive team in the CFL with what we've seen here the last little bit. So Calgary off a loss. Calgary obviously off the bye week. And I think Dickinson, if I'm not mistaken, off the bye week this year. Now, historically, he's been very good off a bye week. Last year, not so much because they had a bad team. But I'm talking about Dave Dickinson and Calgary off a bye week when they have a good team. And this goes back to when Bo Levi Mitchell was the quarterback there. When they had good teams, they were normally a good team to back following a bye week. Well, this year off a bye week, week 5 against Winnipeg at home, they were off a bye. They won that game 37-16. And then August 23rd, off a bye week, they beat Saskatchewan, the team that's in first place, 32-15. So that's 2-0 straight up, 2-0 against the spread, both wins by double digits, off a bye week. So, yeah, I'd have to. It's Calgary or nothing from a -5.5 perspective here. I would lean that way, but I'm gonna ride it one more time. This could be a game where I actually take Calgary -5.5, but I also spin around and take BC team total over 23.5. And remember, the team total for BC in this game, it's only 23.5, and that's because they're playing this great Calgary Stampeders team, and obviously a better team than a lot of BC's recent opponents. So you're getting a discount in the team total. But let me remind you, and again, some of these teams have been, not the greatest defensive teams, but they put up 38 and 33 BC in the 2 games against Ottawa back-to-back, 34 against Toronto, 36 against Montreal, 41 and 33 in the back-to-back games against Hamilton, and even against Saskatchewan, a very good, first-place team in the West Division, arguably the best team in the CFL, one of the best teams in the CFL for sure. They scored 27 points in that game against Saskatchewan in that 33-27 home loss. So against one of the best teams they've played, Nathan Rourke and the Lions were still able to score 27 points. So I'm going to take it. It keeps on cashing. This team total, I think, is now, the BC team total has gone over, if I'm not mistaken now, in 7 straight games. 7 straight games or 8 straight games, rather, for the BC Lions. They've cashed their team total over. And this team total, because of the fact they're only playing they're playing Calgary, one of the better teams in the league, you're getting a discount. We're not getting 32 and a half. We're not getting 30 and a half, 28 and a half with BC's team total this week. We're getting 23 and a half. And I know Calgary's got a great defense, but I still got to believe the way Nathan Rourke is just zipping that football right now. Like, he is just laser sharp, laser focused, deadly accurate right now, throwing the ball. And I got to believe he can have some success offensively. Now, this was a bad Calgary team last year, but I will say this: 3 games against Calgary last year, 26, 24, and 32 points for the BC Lions. So that would have gone over this 23 and a half in all 3 of those games against Calgary last year. So I'm going to get really, really creative here and go, I think I'm going to go Calgary minus 5.5, BC team total over 23 and a half. Probably lean full game over, because think of the quarterback dynamics here. Nathan Rourke's on a roll. He is just, and this is going to be a much tougher challenge, but I think he's up for it. I think he's playing at a level where even Calgary's great defense is not going to shut him down completely, the way Nathan Rourke's rolling right now. But on the flip side, this is Vernon Adams' first shot playing BC since obviously the relationship ended, and obviously they moved on from him. They made the decision, Nathan Rourke's going to be our guy moving forward. And that's when he moved on from BC, signed in Calgary in the offseason. So you got to believe there's an axe to grind here for Vernon Adams Jr. He's not going to say anything publicly, but he wants to stick it to the BC Lions here. Make no mistake about it, and show them that, hey, I'm the better quarterback than Nathan Rourke. I want to show it here in this game against the BC Lions. So I'm going to go Calgary minus 5.5, BC team total over 23.5. And I'm going to go with the full game over 54.5. If you want to bet Calgary team total over instead of Calgary minus 5.5, I don't mind that either. I think there's a shootout waiting to happen, because I don't think the quarterbacks are going to play passive here. Nathan Rourke wants to show out. He is showing out. They're scoring 30 points every week now, BC. Tougher it will be to do that against this Calgary defense, but I still think BC moves the football, scores their points. He's playing too well right now, Nathan Rourke, and I saw enough defensive decline in Calgary against Edmonton 2 weeks ago to make me think BC can score points and move the ball. But I don't think BC is going to stop Vernon Adams. Vernon Adams is going to play with a point to prove, chip on his shoulder. The fact that BC moved on, kept Rourke, and told him to kick rocks and move on elsewhere. And, of course, he did that, signing with the Stamps. Vernon Adams is going to want to have a big game. And this is a defense he's capable of having a big game against, because I don't think BC's defense is fixed at all, especially when you consider they still gave up 27. The only good defensive game they've played was against the combination of Caleb Evans and James Morgan against Montreal a few weeks ago, when they gave up 18 points. Other than that, they're giving up like high 20s and 30s every single game, this BC Lions defense. So I would go with BC team total over for sure, full game over for sure, because, again, 8 straight overs for BC Lions team totals. So BC Lions team total over 23.5, full game over 54.5. Calgary either minus 5.5 or team total over for them. And their team total, Calgary, is 30.5. So it's pretty high, but I think they could probably hit 31 in this game. And I think we're going to get something like, give me a 38-31 Calgary win. I could see something like that here in this game. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think the storyline of Nathan Rourke playing as well as he is, and now again going up against his former teammate Vernon Adams. From all indications, they have a great relationship, Rourke and VA. There was no animosity between the two of them. It was just, hey, Vernon Adams is still upset, disappointed that, hey, I lose my job because Nathan Rourke comes back from the NFL and they sign him. And now all of a sudden I've got to look elsewhere if I want to be a number one quarterback. Well, he is elsewhere now in Calgary. And boy, is he ever going to want to show what he's capable of here Friday night against his old team. Will, this is a good one. This is a fascinating one. What do you think here for BC Calgary?
Yeah, I'll keep it. I'll get right to the point for the viewers. I see it the same way with the over. I think BC, like you said, it doesn't really matter how well Calgary is playing on defense. If a quarterback's playing at a really high level, there's going to be production, right? And we both agree that BC's defense is abysmal, and so that's going to allow, even if BC trails, they're going to have to score some points. They'll be aggressive. They'll go for it in certain situations. They might have some points at the end of the game trying to rally. we're not arguing that Calgary is, the team that we like in this spot, but I think it bodes well for the over either way. And then you throw in the quarterback dynamic of those quarterbacks being aggressive and going for it. So I like the over. I like the BC team total over. I like the 54.5 for the total. And I don't like what I'm seeing from BC in terms of what's on the injury report here. James Butler, Javon Cotoy, Gary Peters, Deshaun Allen, like some real starters that are a little banged up.
Yep.
And then Calgary coming off of a bye, and they've, Dave Dickinson and his staff have shown that, hey, we still got it, and they're well coached, and I trust them in this spot here at home, especially. And I will say I really feel horrible about my Grey Cup pick, because I just don't think BC's defense is just made of anything championship caliber, and they've given me no reason to see anything otherwise. And I'm with you. As much as we talk about Toronto, this has been just, hey, book them for 30 points, on defense.
Yeah.
So I don't see this week being any different.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're right. There's Gary Peters. There's Javon Cotoy. You're right, Deshaun Allen, who's one of the better offensive linemen in the CFL. If they don't have him, that would be a blow. And I would worry from a BC standpoint a little bit offensively about the pass rush of Calgary if they don't have, Allen or Jarrell Broxton, for that matter, who's also on the injured list. But I will say this about Deshaun Allen. He's had a lot of injury issues already this year. And the one thing about Nathan Rourke is he's got mobility, athleticism. Oh, yeah. If that pocket collapses, he's not a sitting duck back there. He can escape. And when he gets on the move, and he's probably going to have to use his legs because Calgary can get after the quarterback up front. That's when he's very dangerous, because as far as throwing on the move, throwing on the run, there's not many in this league that are as good as Nathan Rourke at that.
Yep.
So that is where BC can still make their hay on offense, even if they do, have a few concerns with their line going into this game tonight. All right, next up on Saturday, first of the doubleheader, Winnipeg and Ottawa. Ottawa, 2-point home favorites, 51.5 the total in this game. It is going to be Chris Streveler again at quarterback. Zach Collaros barely practicing on a limited basis, so it's going to be Chris Streveler again. And look, the heat's turning up on Mike O'Shea. The fans were upset with Chris Streveler's performance against Hamilton last week, rightfully so. I was there. He was awful. Accuracy was horrific. Decision-making equally as bad. But when you have no zip on the ball and you're just, your accuracy wanes, you're going to have a game like that. And he did. He had a nightmare game. That's the best way to put it last week against Hamilton. And, the Winnipeg fans are saying, well, if Zach Collaros is out, why don't you give Terry Wilson a chance? And, of course, he's a guy that played at Kentucky. Now, look, I get the frustration that there is with Chris Streveler in the passing game right now, because he's got to be better. He can't be turning it over like this. He's got to get more accurate with his throws. It's that simple, period. He's got to get more accurate throwing the football. This can't continue. But I don't know if Terry Wilson's the answer. I know he's got some athleticism too, but he's very much like Streveler. He's a very limited passer. I saw him at Kentucky. He wasn't any friggin' good throwing the football with consistent accuracy, okay? So this notion that Terry Wilson's going to be a huge upgrade from Chris Streveler, I think's foolish. I don't think that that's going to happen, because I saw that kid throw at college at Kentucky, and he wasn't very accurate either for half the time. So, at least with Streveler, you've got the guy that's been with the team for years. I get it. They're frustrated. The fans are saying Mike O'Shea's too loyal to this guy, and they're getting upset that Mike O'Shea vehemently defended Chris Streveler in the media yesterday, saying, he's a leader. We believe in him. He's the hardest working guy, but you can only say that for so long without the results and the production going with that. And that, I think, is what has Bombers fans frustrated. Maybe Terry Wilson is going to struggle, but they'd like to at least give him a chance, because at the moment, the passing game with Streveler is not working. It's just not. And last week against Hamilton, we saw that, but they're reluctant to make a change. Mike O'Shea is going to give Chris Streveler another chance. What I am just cautioning everybody is, I know you're clamoring to see, Terry Wilson get a shot. All I'm saying is I saw that guy play at Kentucky, and I don't think he was very accurate. You're going to have the same issues possibly that you're having right now with Chris Streveler. That's what I'm trying to tell everyone watching and listening right now. But at this point, if this continues for Streveler, you almost have to give Wilson a shot just to change a pace and at least see what he's got. because Strevler needs a good game here. There's no question. Is he capable of it? We'll see. We know Ottawa is the kind of team you could think Winnipeg can get right against. Strevler can kind of get right against here in this game. And let's not forget August 14th against Ottawa. I believe that was a Strevler game, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back. I'm just trying to remember. I think it was that he ended up playing in that game against Winnipeg, against Ottawa earlier in the season out there in Winnipeg. And like I said, definitely, you're going to have to see what he can deliver here coming off the Hamilton game. But it was definitely not pretty last week, and it was there was just some not only inaccuracy, but the decision making that went with it really ended up being a problem in that game for Chris Strevler. So it'll be interesting to see how he can bounce back here in this game on Saturday against Ottawa. No, it was Collaros. I beg your pardon.
Yep, Collaros
in that 30-27. So he didn't face Ottawa in that game. So he is facing them here for the first time. Drew Brown might be back here for Ottawa. His practice, he's been ramping up in practice this week. And to be honest with you, there's been improvement in Dustin Crum the last couple of games. He's been a little bit better. But obviously the best chance to win and the best chance for your offense to be at their best is Drew Brown, without question. And it looks like Drew Brown, practicing in full, will be back here for Ottawa. It's probably a big reason why they're favored, because you would think Ottawa favored over Winnipeg. Well, Winnipeg's got a quarterback that's struggling mightily with downfield passing in Strevler, and Ottawa's going to get their best quarterback returning. So you could actually probably give the quarterback edge to Ottawa here in this game. And I don't even think there's a big defensive difference between these two teams. They're both kind of struggling. Ottawa's given up 42, 30, 30, 33, 38 in the last 5 games to Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and then the back-to-back against BC. So Ottawa's defense is having a problem right now. Winnipeg's defense hasn't been that great. They gave up 32 to the Ticats last week, 21 to Saskatchewan, 34 to Saskatchewan. Yeah, they shut down James Morgan. Big deal, 13 points. Every other game, they've given up, 32, 21, 34, 27, 28, 31. This is not the same Winnipeg defense. It is not at all. Willie Jefferson's lost a step, a little bit. Their linebacking core is weaker and their secondary is a mess. They already lost Terrell Bonds, Jamal Parker to injury, and that secondary is just not covering well down the field. Even saw it again last week against Hamilton. Some big plays in the passing game were given up by that Winnipeg secondary. So this, to me, I lean over again with this game, 52. But the problem is Ottawa's defense, even though it's been bad, if Strevler's going to have the issues, throwing the ball again, that could keep the game under. But I don't know. I think Strevler will be a little bit better, in this game. Winnipeg will do enough. Oliveira can, rely on the run game as well here for Winnipeg. Ottawa, I think, will move the football, though, with Drew Brown back. I really do think they'll have success because it's just not that same Winnipeg defense. So the over I would look at, I got to be honest, I lean Ottawa. I can't believe I'm saying that. But now the one concern is Ottawa has the bye week next week. So it's another one of these situations where be careful because you got a betting on a team going into their bye week. This is a little bit different, though, because Ottawa's coming off a loss. So I think there's a better chance that they'll be really dialed in to this game than, say, Saskatchewan last week when they were coming off the 2 big wins against Winnipeg. They're coming off a loss. So hopefully the focus will be there for Ottawa. But I'm at the point now with Chris Strevler, it's a show-me league right now with him. Show me what you can do. Show me you can be more accurate. Show me you can lead your team to victory because you're having a hard time doing that right now. So for me, it would be a lean Ottawa, lean over if I'm betting this game. Will, what do you think for Saturday here? Blue Bombers, Red Blacks.
Yeah, a little bit of noise on both sides, huh? For Ottawa sitting at 4-9,
yeah,
put up or shut up right now. I don't think you can afford to lose this game. It starts to get away from you at that point. Yeah. So going into the bye, coming off of a loss, I expect this team to be ready to go. And Drew Brown being a little bit of a wild card, it'd be nice to know what you're going to get with this team week in and week out. I said, I think last week or 2 weeks ago on the show that I was just kind of out on the whole Drew Brown thing. It's just not available a lot. And that's your best ability as an athlete, is your availability. So I don't know what to expect from him. After seeing Chris Strevler, struggle last week. Still, I mean, I think his stat line was like 19 to 29, 200 and something yards, a touchdown, 2 picks, and he ran the ball for like 80 yards or so. Brady Oliveira went for over 100. So, if you take the emotions out of it, the production was still not the worst thing you've ever seen. So just totally speaking anecdotally here. Give me Winnipeg on the road, getting it done. I like the under here. I think this is going to be two hard-fought, desperate teams getting after it. But I don't like it going over 52 here. But give me Winnipeg getting points on the road at Ottawa.
Yeah, and I kind of leaned under last week with Winnipeg Hamilton, and that game ended up going over, although barely. I think a lot of it was the points that happened late, and there was a late touchdown in garbage time for Winnipeg right at the end that pushed it over the total. Yeah, this is not. I like the total in the Calgary game over way more than this. These are just, for me, it's still very difficult to take an over with these two defenses. I just haven't seen good enough defense from either one, but. You would think Strevler, let's really commit to running the ball here even more.
Yeah.
I thought they were trying to get too cute, last week against Hamilton, especially early. Let's show that Strevler is a passing quarterback. He's not. Run the ball, man. Do your strength.
100%.
Time-consuming drives, time of possession, move the chains, tire out the defense from having to tackle that big man in the open field, Oliveira, and then use Chris Strevler on RPOs. Where you fake the handoff to Oliveira, he keeps it instead, and there he goes. And, of course, he's a battering ram, Strevler. That's one of his strengths. He can run you over when he runs that ball and put him in situations where he only has to throw short to intermediate passes because he's got no accuracy on the deep ball, none, zero. So that's the kind of offense you should be running. This falls on Jason Hogan to figure this out. Ian Cameron shouldn't be telling him this. He should know that. But the bottom line is this is the kind of offense they need to be running. Run, run, run. Wear down this Ottawa defense. Keep Chris Strevler in second and manageable, second and short situations, and give this offense a fighting chance. And, time of possession. Just lean on this defense. That's the pathway to success and winning for Winnipeg and for anyone on Will's side of this matchup here, thinking about taking the Blue Bombers here +2. All right, the last game for Week 16, and I'll be there Saturday night at Hamilton Stadium. Edmonton Elks, Hamilton Tiger Cats. Hamilton 6-point home favorites, 56 the total. What an atmosphere it was last week. Great performance by Hamilton. A very emotional night. Ted Gavaya, rest in peace. We've got the Team Ted little towels. It's basically a towel in the shape of a jersey that they handed out at the game, and everyone held it up when they did the tribute after the first quarter on the video scoreboard to him last week. Sad news. Fought cancer. I mean, that's really the only thing I can say. It's that disease is it's vicious. It's relentless. It's taken, the lives of people I either know of or have known personally. A friend of mine, his mother passed away from cancer. It's just a horrific disease. But it was a very emotional night, and it was fitting that it was Winnipeg Hamilton the night after Ted Gavaya's passing, because he's the GM of the Ticats this year, but he was the former assistant GM of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So big connection to both of those franchises and organizations last week. But it was a great game from Hamilton. They made life difficult for Strevler, although Strevler kind of said, kind of helped Hamilton's defense by kind of gifting him a couple of really bad throws. But nevertheless, you got to give Hamilton's defense credit. And Bo Levi Mitchell and the offense looked really good in that game. They were able to move the football throughout and get that 32-21 win last week. Win and cover, coming off, obviously, the frustrating loss that they had, or coming off the win, I should say, against Montreal, which followed the frustrating loss against Labor Day. But I got the sense that, losing the game in heartbreaking fashion against Toronto on Labor Day, and this was their first home game since then, and the fact the GM just passed away the night before, you figured, hey, this was going to be a big emotional effort from the Ticats, and they certainly delivered it last week against Winnipeg. Can they deliver one again? Because now, they're facing an Edmonton team that they're coming off their own heartbreaker, 31-30 against Toronto last week. They should have won that game. They were in control. They led most of the game. It was the Cody Fajardo sack fumble late scoop and score at just that turned it toward Toronto. It gave them an open door to come back and win that game, and that's exactly what happened. Even without Nick Arbuckle, Jarrett Dagey ends up getting the football with a minute to go, puts them in field goal range, and they kick the game-winning field goal as time expired. And tough loss for Edmonton, which has still played better football under Cody Fajardo. The overall win-loss record is 4-4 in the 8 games with Cody under center, but they're 6-2 against the spread with Cody. Actually, 7-1 against the spread with Cody Fajardo under center. The only non-cover was against the Labor Day game at Calgary, 28-7. That was the worst game they've played with Cody Fajardo at quarterback, and the offense just didn't work. But other than that, they've either won or they've lost by a very small margin. They lose by 3 at Saskatchewan, lose by 4 at home against Hamilton, and then they lose by 1 last week against Toronto. Those were the 3 of the 4. The only loss they've gotten blown out in since Cody's been the quarterback in 8 games was the Calgary game on Labor Day. So 7-1 against the spread. You look at their track record here as, underdogs, and other than that Calgary game, it's been very good. I know Hamilton's coming off back-to-back wins by double digits against Montreal, Winnipeg. I think if they play a crisp, clean, efficient offensive game, they could. And Edmonton does still have injuries on defense with Brinkman on the defensive line, Nick Anderson at linebacker, Royce Mechie, in the secondary may not play, and they've been banged up a little bit on defense the last few weeks, Edmonton, so that's a concern. But Cody Fajardo in the offense, we continue to see their capabilities, including, they played well against Toronto last week. Can't blame them, really, other than the sack fumble, but that's more on the offensive line, and you got to give Toronto defensively up front a little bit of credit for that. I think this is a spot for Edmonton to hang in there again, though. I really do. Hamilton, yes, last week they were, a sizable favorite and they covered. But prior to last week, look at Hamilton's track record laying points at home, prior to last week. And again, Chris Strevler was horrific. His awful play really went a long way to giving Hamilton that boost. I know I'm being rough on Chris Strevler. I admit it. I know. But it was bad, man. It was really bad. The decision-making and the lack of accuracy was really rough to watch, unfortunately. But before that 11-point win at home against Winnipeg last week, they were 4.5-point home favorites on Labor Day against Toronto. They lost outright. They were 3-point home favorites against BC. They lost in overtime, 41-38. And they were 5.5-point home favorites way back in July, Hamilton, against Ottawa, and they only won that game by 3. So they have not been great for the majority of the season as home favorites until last week against Winnipeg. But I put Cody Fajardo way ahead of Chris Strevler in the passing department right now. And I think Edmonton, there's a major sense of urgency. I'm reading stuff from Cody saying, I think we can still make the playoffs. I'm not giving up yet. I know it's looking bleak at the moment with where we're at, coming off a heartbreaking, gut-wrenching loss to Toronto. We're 5-8. We're last in the West Division. But when you think about it, Will, they're 5-8 in the West Division and they're last. They could still move to the crossover in the East Division and make the playoffs in the East, because the third place team in the East is Toronto at 5-8, the very same record that Edmonton has. So I believe Cody when he says, hey, we can make the playoffs. Our season's not over. We got lots of football left. There's still probably 6 or 7 games left for every team right now. You absolutely could still make the playoffs here at this point in time. Some teams, it looks like most teams have 5-6 games left right now. Still plenty of time for Edmonton. And catching points as underdogs, other than Labor Day against Calgary, they've been phenomenal in this point spread role since Cody Fajardo took over. So, I'm a Ticat fan, but as I say, I'm always going to be unbiased from a betting standpoint on this show when I give an opinion on a Ticats game. I'd say take Edmonton +6. I think they're in this game. I think it's a competitive game. I think the Elks have the mindset to wipe away a tough performance like that, a tough ending like that against Toronto last week. And again, Hamilton finally won and covered as a sizable home favorite against Winnipeg, but there were a lot of mistakes in that game from Winnipeg. Breakdowns on defense, quarterback struggled. If Edmonton avoids those same issues, I think this is a down-to-the-wire type of game. And I wouldn't even rule out Edmonton coming into Hamilton and winning. But I at least think that Edmonton is in this game, and I'll take them +6. Total is pretty high.
It's high.
56. It's high, but boy, oh boy, there's a lot of injuries for Edmonton on defense. Hamilton's kind of an over team. It's one of these deals where I lean over. I just don't love the number being where it is at 56. I don't know if I'd make it official with where the number is right now, but I am going to be on Edmonton +6. I really think they are in this game, and it's a competitive one. Will, what do you think? Edmonton, Hamilton.
Yeah, my first reaction looking at the line was I didn't understand it. And so this is one of my favorite matchups in terms of
I wonder if they're 6-point favorites, Will, this big of a favorite because of the fact Hamilton's leading their division and they've got the 8-5 record that they have, and then it's a 5-8 Edmonton team on the other side, and people just think, you know what, let's make it a almost a touchdown gap between these two teams. Yep.
Yeah, I don't see it optically the same way. So I like Edmonton in this spot. I'm not picking them to win outright, but gosh, 6 points is a lot. I think we both can agree. The games that Cody Fajardo's started, he's 4-4, as you mentioned, but damn it, they're outside of the Labor Day blow up, whatever. They've been in every football game, down to the wire, close, competitive, back and forth, good offensive production, not always clean at times. A lot of games he's been getting hit quite a bit, but he's going to battle. He's going to hang in there. He's mentioned, as you said in the headlines, that, hey, we absolutely have a path to make the playoffs. I still believe. I think these guys will absolutely play hard. And Hamilton's not a bunch of world beaters, right? They had a good game, but their wins have been, not dominant by any stretch of the imagination. So I like Edmonton here getting this many points. That total is definitely pretty high. But as far as Edmonton, 7 of the last 8, with the spread, I like it.
All right. Yeah. By the way, this has been a road warrior series. By the way, these two teams, Hamilton 3-0 straight up and against the spread the last 3 times they played Edmonton in Edmonton, but Edmonton has returned the favor when they've come to Hamilton. Edmonton 3-0 straight up, 3-0 against the spread in Hamilton the last 3 times they've come here. And I think they were underdogs in every game, if I'm not mistaken, as well, this Edmonton team. So they've won outright as underdogs 3 times in a row that they've come to Hamilton. So I think they are live here. I think they're very much in this game. They've even got a chance to win it, in my opinion. But yeah, Edmonton +6 is definitely the way I would go in that one. Great stuff with Will Arndt here on this edition of the show. Before we wrap it up and get to best bets, a little NFL to talk about. What has stuck out to you through the first 2 weeks? I know you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, and they're dealing with quarterback change now. J.J. McCarthy injured out for at least a few weeks, and now Carson Wentz. Holy shit. When we're asking Carson Wentz to come through for us, that's not exactly the fate that I'd want my team in. But what do you think, Will, NFL so far through 2 weeks?
Well, from the Viking standpoint, I've been discouraged with JJ McCarthy. He's whatever, 22 years old, I think, still, maybe 23 now, and he has been in the league for a year. I thought the backdrop for him to do well this year, was there to, kind of hit the ground running. But, outside of one quarter, he's played bad football. And this coaching staff, I have too much faith and confidence in. The roster is awesome, in my opinion. So I've been discouraged with JJ. Maybe this will be a good chance for him to kind of reset, get away from, see it from the sidelines for a second, and maybe come back and do some good things. But it's not something I'm going to, read into too much. I just want to see how it plays out, because if Carson Wentz goes in there and plays awesome and the team gets, that's going to be very telling about JJ, but also just Kevin O'Connell and what he brings to the table. So excited to kind of see what that dynamic brings, but I don't know if I have super high playoff aspirations for this team this year. It's looking to be a little bit of a transition year, especially with how much of the world beaters that the Green Bay Packers have looked like.
Yeah, how about Green Bay? Right now, they look like the best and most impressive team in the NFL right now. Through 2 games, there's a long season ahead, but they look great on both sides. Jordan Love looks a lot better. The run game's been good. Even without Christian Watson, the receiving core with, Reed and Wicks and Dobbs, and especially the tight end, Tucker Kraft. He's been phenomenal here in
Yeah.
these first couple. And then the defense. I mean, they're on all three levels. Pass rush is there. Micah Parsons helps make Rashawn Gary a lot better, because, they got to pay attention to Parsons. So Gary gets more opportunities to get to the quarterback. Linebacking core looks on. The secondary is covered pretty well early in the season. So that defense looks really good. Jeff Hafley's been a great defensive coordinator there for Green Bay. So, like I said, there's a lot to like about what we're seeing from the Packers. In Minnesota, I'm not giving up on J.J. McCarthy yet. It's been a rough, let's be honest, there's been 7 bad quarters and 1 good quarter from him in 2 games. So that's a rough beginning. But like I said, he works with Kevin O'Connell. It's too early, too small a sample size to, lower the casket when it comes to J.J. McCarthy's NFL career. But like I said, definitely there's some concerns with the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll see what Wentz. Now he does have the benefit of working with KOC, but and he has started a ton of games in the NFL going back to his Eagles days. But like I said, we'll see if Minnesota can get the most out of him moving forward. All right, great show, great stuff as always, Will. Awesome work. Let's wrap this thing up. It's time for best bets. Best bets have been good on this show. They've been good from you as well, Will, when you've been on the show. So what do you got for us for Week 16 in the CFL, Will? Best bet.
Yeah, a couple disclaimers real quick on the NFL stuff. I think Kansas City will be back. I think they'll figure it out. It might be messy this year, but when push comes to shove, come playoff time, I would not want to see them, but I think they'll absolutely be in the mix. I will give a Super Bowl prediction that I want to just put out in the air. This is not a popular pick, but I'm going to go with Rams and Ravens, and I have the Ravens winning it all this year. I know it's very contrarian, but that's just wanted to put it out in the open because last year I was able to do that, and it was fun to see looking back on the show with Ian here, where we kind of spoke it.
If Matthew Stafford stays healthy, and I've liked that defense, the Rams, that could be a pick that's got a chance for you.
For sure, yeah, it's contingent on Matthew Stafford for sure. And then my best bet of the week, our last CFL game, Edmonton getting 6 points. 7 of the last 8 games against the spread they have covered. So I think it's going to be a competitive football game, and I like Cody Fajardo to keep them in the mix. And whether or not they win, I don't know. But getting 6 points, far too many. Give me Edmonton in that spot.
All right, Edmonton Elks. I agree. I'm a Ticat fan, and I agree, though. Edmonton is the right way to go in that game, in my opinion, as well. +6 against Hamilton. So Edmonton +6 for a best bet. My best bet here, there we go. My best bet here for this Week 16 card, I was going back and forth here. Do I go with BC team total and ride 8 straight BC team total overs that have cashed? 8 straight games, the BC Lions team total over is cashed. Do I go with that, or do I go with the full game over in that game? I'm going to go with the full game over because I want Vernon Adams on my side here. I think he is going to rip apart this BC defense. He is motivated to do it because of them deciding, Nathan Rourke's our guy. We're going to move on from you. He's going to want to prove a point here in his first opportunity to play against his former team, the BC Lions. And I think he will play one hell of a game here against them. I think they're going to have a hard time covering those Clark Barnes and Damian Alford and all those great Calgary receivers. I think they're going to the secondary, and they may not have Gary Peters, one of their veteran stalwarts in the secondary this week either, the BC Lions. So that's concerning. I think they'll put up 30s at minimum. And BC with Nathan Rourke, though, he is playing red-hot football. I respect the Calgary defense. It will not be easy for Nathan Rourke against them, but I think he can lead the BC offense to enough points to send that game over the total. So there are some 54s out there, so shop around. BC, Calgary, over 54 for my best bet here for this Week 16 edition of CFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Will, great show. Anything to say before we say goodbye?
Be good, do good. Until next time.
There you go. Short, sweet, and to the point. And it's great advice, too. For Will Art, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great Week 16. Enjoy the games and good luck in CFL Week 16, and we'll be back next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.